It's time to bring on our first panel of the day, and we have some really great experts to talk about aligning imperatives, opportunities, and capabilities for more resilient and agile enterprises. We have Shivani Saini, Global Vice President Technology, GSK Consumer Healthcare; So Siu Chu, Managing Director, Group Head of Consumer Banking and Big Data Analytics Technology, DBS Bank; Tobias Puser, Vice President and Head of Innovation and Customer Solutions, Asia Pacific and MasterCard; Ian Zhong, Regional Director and Head of Enterprise, IT and Mobile B2B, Southeast Asia and ANZ for Samsung; and Mark Weiser, Vice President of Asia Pacific, OutSystems. And to moderate the session, I welcome back Rama, CIO's CEO.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. So let's dive straight into the topic. It's all about aligning imperatives, opportunities, and capabilities for more resilient and agile enterprise. So I think the two operative words here is resilience and agility. Okay, so we're going to play on those two words a fair bit during the panel discussion. Before we start the actual engagement with the panelists, let me just say a few words. With the current COVID, we all know it has affected different levels at the government level, at the enterprise level, as well as at the individual level, right? And, leaders are trying to find their sweet spot, right? With every organization, they have their own recipes to stay operational. But what's important is that leaders have to address new and urgent priorities while keeping an eye on the broader space of emerging opportunities. And I believe Gert, in his keynote address, said something similar. He said, don't go into the future with fear. Go into it looking for opportunities, okay? So with that as a backdrop, let me pose the first question to you, Shivani. Shivani, you're with the healthcare sector, with GSK. Everybody's talking about the K-shaped recovery. I would say the healthcare sector is probably seen as one of the winners, right, during this period of the crisis. So my question for you, Shivani, is that the healthcare sector has seen a surge in demand, right? But also production supply chains have been disrupted, right, during this crisis. So how has that impacted your priorities, your practices at GSK in terms of how you've been leveraging technologies? Shivani?
Thank you so much, Rama. First of all, I want to say I'm really delighted to be part of this panel and the Leadership Summit. It's very refreshing to hear the speakers, and it has a extremely positive, optimistic feel to this summit. So congratulations, Rama, for organizing this. I work in GSK, and GSK is a pharma and a consumer healthcare company. So we have vaccines, pharmaceuticals, medicines, as well as consumer health, which is products which you're more familiar with, like Panadol and Sensodyne. With the COVID situation, of course, I think the supply chain has actually been really testing times, because the demand has not been we could not anticipate the demand, especially around, things like Panadol. And also looking at, pharmaceuticals and vaccines, which are typically, have a pretty steady state of supply and demand. Those are also going up and down because people are not getting vaccinated as much as before, given the lockdown. So we were seeing a lot of surges and spikes, as well as lows coming in our supply chain. I wouldn't say we've solved everything, but I think what we are getting is much more clarity on transparency of demand and forecasting that with our tools, which we have in terms of predictive analytics, to understand, what the shopper needs are, what the consumer needs are, where are our patients, even more. So I think it's been testing in terms of the resilience of the organization, of our data and analytics capability like never before. So first quarter, I think we saw a big surge where we'd actually high in sales, given that people were actually doing a lot of loading. We call it pantry loading. People were buying Panadol upfront. Then we saw a dip because people had already bought those things, right? But now it's coming to a much more stable one. But I think what we've learned is what are the behavior patterns, and with those patterns, we are putting that into part of our algorithms to learn how do we actually make our systems learn about these demand forecasting and putting that into the production as well as distribution patterns. So huge learning there. And second piece I would say is around go to market. So we realized that our sales representatives, our expert representatives, actually cannot visit the pharmacist. They cannot visit the dentist anymore, right, because of the lockdown situation. And that's where we've accelerated our plans around doing remote engagement. Uh, uh, that remote engagement was going to come 2 years from now, but we decided to bring it out now. And now that remote engagement is working so well, where our expert reps are, using full technology to do webinars, to connect with the pharmacists, dentists, educating about our products. And therefore, I think that's been a pretty consistent way of engagement where we're understanding consumer needs, shopper needs, and pharmacist needs using technologies. So again, an answer of what you were saying, Rama, on agility and going agile, which for me, agile, one of the key mantras is being really customer centric.
Okay. Thanks, Shivani. I picked up on a few things that you said there, about behavioral patterns changing. And of course, you talked about agility, responding to customer satisfaction. So maybe this is the time where I'm going to ask someone from the financial sector. So Siu Chu, right? On that point that Shivani made, right, about customers changing. So you're working in the bank, you're from DBS, right? So how have the banks been helping customers to get through this crisis, right? And also, what kind of changes have you seen customer behaviors, again, the point about behaviors, right, and expectations have changed? And how have you used digital to engage the changes that you have seen? Siu Chu?
Thanks, Rama. So I think COVID has given us a great opportunity to accelerate the digital adoption that we have been driving amongst all our customers, whether it is the retail customer or the corporates that we have, for many years now, actually across all the markets that we have been in. So, those of you who are in Singapore know that one of the biggest population that has been severely impacted by COVID has been the foreign workers. So in the early days, in April, May, actually, we have seen a huge uptick in terms of digital account opening for the foreign workers. In fact, we opened up 41,000 account as compared to the less than 11,000 on a typical period during that time. And this has helped actually the foreign workers who were quarantined to get access to digital banking and to cash while they were not able to move about. So that has been a great and has given us great satisfaction that the bank is able to help out our clients in the foreign workers segment. The other key group of clients we have been working very closely with, as an example, is the F&B clients actually. So during this period, of course, the acceptance of digital payment and the ability to have your business online is a very key one. So we actually partnered with two local startups, Ode and Firstcom, to help our F&B clients to establish an online presence, as well as to accept online payments. So again, this has been hugely successful and has been greatly appreciated by our customer. And of course, actually, the government across all the markets we were in roll out many schemes to help the client base, and this has has meant actually a lot of volume coming into our various systems, and we have been actually, because of our investment, we have been able to support all of these schemes without any problem. And I would say finally, we see a huge uptick in terms of the investment products, for being leveraged by a lot of our clients, and a lot of interest in terms of the various investment and insurance products. So for these two areas, I think we have been able to support the huge ramp up in terms of the volume. And all of this, I think, is thanks to our investment that we have made many years ago and continue to do so. And we see a huge uptick in terms of digital adoption across all the markets. And I think this is a great thing because digital adoption based on our analysis actually help the clients to be, I think the cost of servicing the clients is lesser. Hence, the price of the prices that is there, the pricing is also more efficient in terms of our offering. So I think all in all, COVID has just accelerated the adoption, and I think people say that necessity is a master of invention. I think we would like to say that necessity is the master of adoption as well.
Okay. Thanks, you two. I like that the last quote about being the master of invention, and yeah. But the point that you made, which I thought was quite true, is that in DBS, your digital transformation journey actually goes back many years ago, right? So it was not like as though you were caught off guard, right? So digitally you were sound, and like you said, maybe the search, it sort of just accelerated the efforts and the energies that you're putting in terms of serving your customers, right? Am I right to say that, Suchu?
Yes. I think the adoption has accelerated because I think of necessity actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm going to ask another gentleman, Tobias from MasterCard, also from the financial sector. But Tobias, I'm going to switch tracks a little, right? I'm going to go more into the innovation side, right? Because you are also looking after innovative business models and all the other innovative aspects of your work. How has the crisis in some ways influenced, right, your priorities in innovation at MasterCard?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, first of all, innovation, I think, is really about people getting together, understanding the signals of the market and really shaping the new ideas of how do we take the world forward. And I think we heard a lot of these ideas from the futurists just now in terms of all the possibilities that are out there. Now, when we look at an innovation journey from a financial services industry point of view, I think there's elements of going as broad as possible. So we have a strong inclusion message that we always want to pursue to really fundamentally say, like, how do we include the next billion users in a financial industry? How do we create access points for merchants so they can receive payments, that they can get paid, that they can have access to capital? So ultimately, it's about fundamental purpose. Like, what is the purpose of our innovation? And it is actually to improve people's lives. And how do we do it? Well, we can be chased by technology, which in many ways we also just heard, like, we should move away from motherhood statements, right? Like, we all talk about AI and blockchain, etc., but really focus on the use case applications. And I think the practical examples that we're seeing now with touchless dining, that I think was just mentioned in terms of us scanning QR codes in restaurants and paying with a card on file in an actual physical location, is the Uberization of commerce. And in many ways, we can also see elements of that in contactless commerce as a part of hygiene, right? We look at the resilience of the network, the ability for us to shift our consumption habits online, to be able to get food delivered to our homes, to be able to consume online content, to be able to do online gaming. And the innovation journey will always continue with these consumers at the core and at the center. And what we will continue to do as part of that journey is to accelerate our thinking about what are the future use cases, what are the tipping point moments, what are accelerants in the market. So ultimately, we can figure out what will matter, but also play with purpose in many ways. I think innovation is obviously tougher sometimes when we're in a crisis mode. How do we solve the short-term problems, the medium-term problems, while at the same time still focusing on the future? But I think that's where resilient business models, people that have focused on transformation for many years, I think best positioned to continue that journey, continue that focus. Now, one aspect on people I think that I always like to call out, I think we have a lot of Zoom, we have a lot of Teams, digital collaboration, etc. I think what will be really challenging and also an opportunity for us is to say, how do we stay connected as innovators, as creatives? Where can machines not basically take over that creative journey? And I think that's, as much as we like being connected virtually, I think we do love a whiteboard, right? I think there's tools, obviously, to facilitate that. But I think that is going to be the transformational challenge that we need to focus on. How do we not just make our systems resilient and keep the uptime high, but how also do we continuously have conversations, continuously bring the right people in a room to discuss the future and make that possible as much as we have in the past, when you had casual conversation, that aha moment that came through a casual conversation in the hallway, that led to a new thinking and a new innovative path forward. So that's really important, that we don't neglect that part of the technology transformation.
Thanks, Tobias. Very useful insights. For the rest of you who are tuning on, if you have any questions, please use the chat. And later on, we'll have this engagement with folks from the virtual land, as I put it that way. And please, if you have to raise your hand, we'll get you to ask the questions directly as well. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Tobias, you have laid out a really good background on innovation and what you've been doing. Actually, it connects well with Ian from Samsung. So Ian, just now I mentioned about the K-shaped recovery. Different sectors are experiencing, some are winners, some are losers. I would like to hear from your point of view from Samsung. How do you view this? Who do you think the sectors that would benefit? And connect it with some of the innovation that's happening at Samsung as well. So Ian?
Sure. Thanks, Rama. Firstly, I just want to say that the panel session here, they are at least not half your age. So
okay,
that's a good thing here, right?
That's good, yeah. I feel comfortable, yeah.
And we're very happy to host you here at our Samsung EBC here in Singapore. And we are always open to get our customers to come and see some of the innovations we have that we are doing here in Samsung as well.
Right.
So getting back to your question, so if you look at what's happening today, and I just want to dial back a little bit, because if you think about it, if let's say COVID were to happen 20 years ago, what would it be, right, without tech? And I think yesterday I was just talking to my parents, and we were saying that, hey, thanks to technology, we can have video calls, and they're back in Malaysia, right? So the issue is that without technology, all this would have changed. And I think technology plays a very important part. And because of that, it is really a game changer, like what Gert has mentioned. And we do see a lot of convergence of different technologies coming together, especially on a mobile device.
Right.
Now, if you look at it, we often like to say that, especially during this period of pandemic, we want to be able to have a bolder innovation, right? And that's why we feel that different technologies or different use cases, like what Tobias mentioned as well, is very important, because we do see a trend where, for example, in retail, where we can actually start to incorporate different things. Like, for example, you do not need to have multiple devices and shared devices, especially because, especially for COVID, workers do not want to share, right, a walkie-talkie, for example. Right. So we can actually combine that into a single device, like a mobile phone. We can do payments. In fact, today we are working with people like MasterCard, for example, where you can actually tap at the back of the phone using your credit card or using contactless payment, right, just to complete the transaction.
Something like what Tobias mentioned.
Exactly.
Now, right? Yeah.
So if you look at it, we are combining payments, we are combining the walkie-talkie. Today we are even looking at, for example, a phone like this where we can, use it like a tablet. So we're also combining the use of a larger screen on a single device, like the Samsung Galaxy Fold 2 5G as well. But on top of that, we are replacing a PC, right? And why is this important? In my opinion, and you see during COVID, there was a period of circuit breaker here in Singapore, and I think there are different names like MCO and different in different countries where it is a lockdown, right? And we do see with World Economic Forum, they also mentioned that there's going to be a lock and release period during this time. It won't be something where it'll be a smooth recovery. And we do see this happening, and you can see in UK, in Paris, in different locations where it's starting to lock down again. And this whole lock and release is going to happen. But if you look at it, in the past when the breakdown happened, or the lockdown happened, people are starting to lock their PCs back home. But one thing is that they haven't really secured everything around them. Right? And we do see that mobile plays a very important part, because why? 10 years ago until now, mobile is probably the only one where it is already working as a remote tool.
Yeah.
Right? We've already secured it from day one. And it's probably the only tool today where it is secure from whether you're working in the office or when you're back home. Yeah. And with all the convergence of all these different technologies, and whether it's with 5G, with VR, with IoT, we see that all combining into one.
Good.
And in terms of healthcare, we've seen that happening where we can connect to an ultrasound device, and you can use that to scan for pre-COVID patients as well. We are also looking at how we can use the camera as a scanner right, to authenticate that the vaccines and the medicine that's being used are legit. And all this can only be possible with the technology that's available today. And we do see that happening across different industries, whether it's transport and logistics, whether it's healthcare, even education today. We are trying to transform how education is working, because we've been giving out tablets, for example, to schools, but a lot of teachers are still using it like with a whiteboard and just teaching the traditional way.
That's right. Yeah.
But actually, technology is just an enabler,
Yep.
just like what Gert said earlier, where we think that with the tablet, you can do hybrid learning. You can use the pen, you can use it as an ebook. And there's a lot of different use cases that technology and mobile can bring as well.
Thanks, Ian. I'm going to quickly flick over to Mark. Mark, sorry for keeping you waiting for so long, but the next question is for you, Mark. Right? So everybody's talking about agility, and now with execution, everybody wants to roll out the applications quickly, and you're from OutSystems, right? Take us through this whole thing about low code, and how do you see your clients, the kind of demands that they're making from you in terms of the tools that you're using? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Rama. Yeah, for those listeners that don't know OutSystems, we are a software development platform using low-code tools, and we service many different types of industries. Government in Singapore, insurance, banking, logistics, manufacturing. So we get a pretty good view of what's out there in the marketplace relative to what's happened with COVID-19. I think what we see with most of our customers is their real key goal right now is to reach the other side of the pandemic and to be successful in what we all call the new normal. Certainly, we see all major enterprises rewriting their corporate strategy, around COVID-19, particularly their IT strategy. I think one thing we've seen is that digital transformation, roadmaps have really been condensed. Many companies before the crisis had a 3 to 4 year timeline for digitally transforming their enterprises, and that's now been condensed into 1 or 2 years. And now it's really a matter of survival for many companies. I think Gerd really made some great points in his presentation about COVID-19 being a real marker for the digital age in the future, and we certainly see that in our customer base. We see customers that have had weak digital strategies really need to use platforms, certainly like ours and others as well, to build out their digital processes and services very, very quickly using an agile methodology, which an agile methodology is one where you can manage change on a much faster basis and provide value to the business quicker. And in the past, you'd see IT projects that companies would embark on that might, take a year or sometimes even 2 years, and that just doesn't, cut it anymore. Trying to bring a project like that to your CFO in this kind of environment, probably won't get approved. They want to see very, very quick value. So we see the use of platforms, playing a big role in helping companies, get to the other side of the pandemic. And we've also seen, many companies suffer due to, the complexities and cost of legacy systems that just haven't scaled very well in the era of cloud and remote work that has been accelerated by this pandemic. So, we see a lot of companies kind of moving very quickly to the cloud and putting their applications in the cloud, building them quickly so that they can then have digital workflows where their internal processes can be much more capable. So, low code plays certainly a role in that. It's one of the enabling technologies for companies to digitally transform. It's one in where traditionally software applications were written with traditional coding. Where every line of code was written by a developer. And what we're in the sense doing with a technology like low code is automating that process. So we're using artificial intelligence, we're using visual modeling to be able to build applications quickly, so that number one, you can get faster application development. So in most cases at least 5 times faster, and in many cases even more than that. And importantly, agility. Being able to with a pandemic like this, to be able to make changes very, very quickly as your market changes, and creating an environment where you can get faster business value. Because again, in this kind of environment, getting a project approved that it's not going to deliver value for a long time. It's probably not going to happen. So those are some of the things that we're seeing, and why we see the very quick adoption of platforms for companies to be able to become agile and to be able to get through this pandemic and compete for customers going forward.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Mark. Maybe now it's a good time because there are questions rolling in. We've got another 10 minutes to go. There's one question for Shivani. Shivani, this question is for you. Are there added difficulties in your digitalization plan, especially with a complex web of supply chain partners? I guess, in relation to the kind of work that you're doing with pharmaceuticals in the healthcare. Yeah, go ahead, Shivani. Would you like to answer that question?
Definitely. So as I was saying, it's, we're looking at so-called unpredictable supply and demand issues, right? But we know for a fact that when we have the right data and technologies to understand behavior patterns, to having machine learning to figure out, what are the patterns we've seen in other markets and how do we actually predict those as well. Those problems are being tackled by putting the algorithms in place, which are giving us a much predicted model. And with that, we can actually have a much stabilized supply chain. And see, the responsibility on healthcare comes pretty huge. Healthcare, and we are at the center of healthcare and tech, right? The world is waiting for that vaccine to come. So we are looking at the new vaccination for COVID-19. We are also looking at in-home testing for COVID, right? So all these things are, of course, putting a lot of pressure on R&D, on the innovation side of it, but we also have to start predicting on what is the impact on this, on the supply chain, the production and the distribution of it. So to my earlier point, it is testing the resilience we have on our data and analytics, the resilience we have on our master data, which is residing on our ERPs, and how are we utilizing more of the behavior patterns and external forces to actually do a right predictive modeling here.
Right, yeah. So you're right. In fact, Pfizer has just announced, right, the vaccine, and now the conversation seems to be switching not so much about the vaccine itself, but about the whole delivery, right, with the supply chain. So that's become a sticking issue right now, right? So the next question is from Luis Cruz, DBS. Do the panelists believe that data should be regulated at the global, country, or industry level? So maybe your fellow colleague from DBS, Yuchu, would you like to respond to this? How do you see the whole data regulation regime, happening at the different levels?
Sorry, should the data be regulated at the country?
They're asking whether it's a global, country, or at the individual level. Yeah.
I think firstly we should have respect for. Yeah, so I think firstly we should have respect for the generator of the data. So specifically talking about individuals, individuals have the right to protect their data, right? So whether it's global, country, or company or whatsoever, that respect must be there. Without that care, actually, I think you just lose the trust, right? The leverage of data is to ensure that we add value. It should not come as a surprise to the people that you have got this data that they didn't authorize you to have the access to, or they have been made use of or commercialized because you happen to have access to their data that there was no authorization. I think the recent Netflix series on the social dilemma, I think says that shares the issues around the pervasive use of data and the so-called free services, right? That we might be getting from many of the social media company today. In fact, our data is what we have just sold, right? So I truly believe that data, of course, there should be some framework to regulate the responsible use of data.
Right. So Siuchu, do you feel that because you are DBS is operating in many parts of Asia, right? And each of them have their own regulatory regime, right? So do you have to navigate accordingly with the various regulatory rules, and how's it done? Yeah.
Yes, of course. I think we are all very familiar that different regulators within even just the ASEAN markets actually are different. Some countries require you to onshore the data. Some are okay with offshoring and so on. But so it's part and parcel of doing business. I think we have to comply to each and every regulations that are out there. We have to respect. What the regulators in each of the market we want to operate in, what they believe in. So each of these regulation comes with a purpose, and we need to make sure that we adhere to the principle and we implement the spirit behind those regulations.
Okay, good. Yeah. The next question is for Tobias. Tobias, the question is very much about fintech, right? So, in terms of working with the fintech ecosystem, right? The smaller boys, how do you tap on the innovation and the spirit from the fintech community in terms of what you're doing there at MasterCard?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's different elements to that. So one is actually accelerating the business cases. And we have a great program called Start Path with hundreds of fintechs around the world. We sometimes call them rabbits, right? Companies that are doing real interesting businesses that show results, right? It's not about unicorns and valuation. It's about actually solving, again, back to the business cases that we've talked about. But aside from that, I think aside from just basically learning and partnering together on technology, what we also focus on is actually giving the access to the technology. And I think that was part of the question. How do we do that? We do that through our partners like DBS and other new distribution channels that are in the digital spaces, right? Like if you build your online presence through any of the technology platforms, you will be using a digital payment gateway that may be provided by that player. So it's a different model of scale up. But ultimately, it's about making sure that through these different partnerships, through these different channels, we give the right technology to the fintechs. Another area really is around vendors and technologies, like banking as a service, for example, is a great trend that fintechs can lean on to avoid licensing, for example, to avoid a lot of missteps in terms of tech stack. And so I think similar to what Mark was actually talking about platforms, there's so many great platforms out there that we are trying to power up for fintechs, for startups in general, so they can move forward quickly in that space and accelerate their businesses versus having to build everything themselves and exposing themselves to a lot of regulation, a lot of risk. And sharing that risk across the ecosystem is a key priority for us.
Yeah, thanks. I have to shortage of time, so I'm rushing quickly. Mark and Ian, this is the last question. Take it with 1 minute, okay? So how do you accelerate the development of your new digital apps? It can be applied for appliances as well in terms of the usage. And how are the tech teams handling the governance controls? Because there's always a tension between governance and pushing things out rapidly. So you have 1.5 minutes, Mark, very quickly, your response.
Yeah, well, I think, what we see is, a real governed citizen development movement. I think, as you know, more and more business users are using IT, and many of them have IT skills, and platforms like low-code platforms allow businesses to develop applications. In many cases, IT departments haven't delivered fast enough. But we really see the governed citizen development movement being the way to go, where IT and business users work together and really unleash the power of all of the knowledge that may exist in an organization. We see the future where almost every company will become some sort of a cloud software company. They will be digitizing their IP. So I think it's very important that business users and IT work together. Obviously, you have security and scalability issues that IT has a lot of concerns about, but you need to unleash all of the knowledge and IP that you have inside the organization in order to compete in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So Ian, same question. How do you balance between, the various innovative devices and governance controls within the organization?
Yeah, so I think if you look at Samsung's core has always been around privacy as well as security as well.
Yeah.
And it's built into every single device, even your Samsung Note that you're using, right? From that point, it's all locked into the device itself. We work with various mobile device management providers as well, where we adhere to things like common criteria, FITS compliance as well. So if you have a certain set of regulations and governance that needs to be in place for any application or on the device itself, all you need is just push down those criteria, and that gets applied on the devices as well. The other point is that we've just been announced.
So what you're saying is that you can actually find ways to embed the criteria and
Correct.
Allow your
exactly. And part of that is also just yesterday we just announced our continued partnership with Google, with Android Enterprise. So we are now part of the Android Enterprise recommended program across all our devices, from mobile devices to tablets, which means that number one, we take privacy very important. Number two is we look at the governance around that. So any applications that are being pushed from a corporate perspective, we have a trusted Play Store with Google where only these applications can be deployed into an employee's device, for instance.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. So that brings us to the end of this really exciting panel discussion. Panelists, you've done a wonderful job. I have to say that the questions that were coming in from the audience were really good as well. So I hope that all of you out there have got like really good, valuable takeaways from this panel discussion. Okay. So panelists, thank you very much. Shivani, Siu Chu, Tobias, Ian, Mark, thank you so much. Back to you, Joe.